These peasants think they're important because they serve wine in clean glass. Pathetic. Look at them, dark hands, empty minds. And this? This is your future partner? Mr. Shetty's voice oozed arrogance as he spat the words in rapid Hindi to his assistant. His eyes flicked disdainfully toward the servers lining the room, the investors seated in stiff silence, and finally rested on the glass Maya had just placed on the buffet table. But as his harsh words lingered in the air, a strange tension filled the room. No one spoke. No one reacted. The American officials glanced at one another, confused. They'd heard the tone, the scoffing cadence, but none understood a word of what he said. The official translator looked helpless, flipping through notes, realizing too late that the conversation had bypassed him entirely. Only one person in the room had understood every syllable. Maya. She stood just a few steps away, her back straight, eyes locked on Shetty. She hadn't meant to react, hadn't meant to speak. But something ancient and raw rose in her chest. Anger. Yes, but older than that. Pride, dignity. You may have money, sir, Maya said suddenly, in perfect Hindi, her voice sharp and unwavering, but no amount of wealth can hide the ugliness of your ignorance. As Maya's words hung in the air, the room once filled with silence was now charged with a new kind of respect. In that moment, she wasn't just a server. She was the voice no one expected but everyone needed. What would you have done in Maya's place? Would you have stayed silent or spoken up for what's right? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this moment moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage doesn't wear a uniform. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge prejudice and uplift the human spirit. Shetty recoiled as if slapped. His assistant dropped his pen. A gasp escaped one of the U.S. advisors. What did you just say? Shetty demanded, now switching to English. I said, Maya replied calmly, you insulted every person in this room who serves with dignity, and I won't stand silent while you do it. Who do you think you are? He barked, his voice rising. You're a maid, a server. You think knowing a few words of Hindi gives you the right to speak in this meeting? I know more than a few words, she said. And you didn't expect anyone here to understand you. That was your mistake. I want her out, Shetty roared, turning to the hotel manager. Get her out, right now. The manager froze, caught between outrage and fear. James Cartwright, the U.S. negotiator, stood slowly. Mr. Shetty, please. Let's not escalate. She insulted me. You insulted everyone, Maya said, stepping forward, still in Hindi. You dismissed our intelligence, you mocked our appearance, and you did it in a room where you assumed no one was listening. Turner, the lead counsel, stood from his chair. This is absurd, she's staff. She doesn't have clearance to speak here. I wasn't trying to speak, Maya replied. But when a $5 billion deal is about to collapse because someone can't recognize a misinterpreted clause, someone has to. Now the room held its breath. Clause 12B in the draft agreement, she said, her tone composed but firm, was referenced using an outdated term from India's 2015 energy regulations. It's since been updated. That's the source of confusion, not disrespect, not incompetence. Shetty's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? Because I studied the policy, because I studied your language, because I listen. Silence returned, but now it felt different, like the quiet before a shift. Shetty exhaled, still tense, but he no longer looked at her like a server. He looked at her like someone he hadn't anticipated. Cartwright turned toward Maya. Miss? Maya Parker. Well, Miss Parker, it appears you may have just saved this negotiation. For a moment, no one moved. The towering Mayflower chandelier above Maya cast a golden light over the frozen faces around the long, gleaming conference table. The tension was no longer just awkward, it was electric. The U.S. investors stared at her as if she had shape-shifted in front of them. Staff from the hotel service team peeked in from behind the doors, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. Mr. Shetty's jaw was locked tight, his cheeks flushed with a deep shade of red, not just from embarrassment, but from the realization that the lowest-ranking person in the room had just outmaneuvered him. James Cartwright broke the silence. Miss Parker, he said slowly, gesturing toward the seat beside him, if you'd be willing to sit, I think we all have a few questions. Relevant questions. Maya hesitated. She looked down at her service uniform. her name tag still pinned firmly on her chest. This wasn't her seat, not her room. She wasn't supposed to be part of this conversation. But the eyes that met hers now weren't dismissive. They were curious, engaged, even a little impressed. She set her empty tray on the sideboard and walked to the chair. Turner's voice sliced through the fragile thaw. "With all due respect, Mr. Cartwright, we can't just hand the table over to hotel staff. This is a secured negotiation." "And yet," Cartwright replied coolly, "that staff just prevented us from collapsing months of work. So maybe it's time we reevaluate who belongs at the table." Shetty folded his arms, glaring at Maya. "You embarrassed me in front of your people. Don't act like you're some diplomat." Maya turned to him. Her voice was even, but her words carried weight. "Respect is earned, not assumed. If you want to move forward with integrity, then maybe stop expecting silence from the people you step over." There it was again, that shift, the subtle turning of the room in her direction. Cartwright leaned forward. "Let's get something clear. Maya, you mentioned the outdated clause. Can you walk us through exactly what you saw and what was said?" She nodded, her pulse steady now. Mr. Shetty's objection was to language he believed showed ignorance on our part. He mentioned a phrase that was actually from a 2015 energy regulation, Harit Niti Sankshep, which was replaced by a new framework in 2021. But the version in the draft still referenced the old regulation. She looked at Turner. "That draft was printed with your notations." Turner tensed. I reviewed multiple versions. It's possible an earlier file was circulated by mistake." Maya didn't flinch. "It wasn't a mistake. It was negligence. And you were counting on the fact that no one in this room could read the original language." Cartwright rubbed his temple. "Well, that explains the friction." Shetty's assistant cleared his throat. "I can confirm Miss Parker's assessment. That clause has not been used in any Indian government filing since February 2021. Shetty raised an eyebrow at his aide. "You knew this?" The assistant hesitated. "No, sir. I just checked now on my tablet." The room murmured again. Maya's gaze swept the table. These were people who had worked in policy, law, diplomacy, and yet not one of them had caught the flaw. She wasn't gloating, she was stunned. Stunned that the right knowledge, from the wrong person, had been invisible. "Mr. Cartwright," Maya said, "this project matters. Clean energy isn't just policy, it's people. If we can't get the language right, we'll never get the trust." Cartwright nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right." He looked around the room. "I move we take a 20-minute recess. Everyone review the draft. Legal will confirm what Miss Parker identified. When we return, we'll proceed with full clarity." No one objected. As people began rising, Maya stood too. She turned toward the door, ready to slip out as quietly as she'd spoken up. But Cartwright called after her. "Maya, stay close." She blinked, caught off guard. "Sir, I have a feeling this won't be your last word in this deal." Maya didn't respond. She only nodded, then stepped outside into the hallway. As the heavy doors closed behind her, her heart finally beat like a drum. She stood still, back against the wall, the white trim cool against her spine. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from release. She'd spent years holding her voice in. Today, it had come out. She could still hear her grandmother's voice in her head. "Mouths stay shut when no one believes you matter, so teach them different." A voice called her name. It was Anna, the front desk supervisor. "Girl, what the hell did you just do in there?" Maya smiled, half dazed. "I think I might have just translated my way into trouble." "No," Anna said, shaking her head. "You just translated your way into the spotlight." And for the first time in years, Maya didn't shrink from it. The Mayflower's executive lounge was unusually quiet. Maya sat alone near a window, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup that did little to settle the storm inside her. She should have returned to the service floor, resumed her duties, but Cartwright's voice still rang in her ears. "Stay close." She'd taken it as permission to wait nearby, though she wasn't sure for what. Outside, the sun was inching toward noon, casting slanted beams through the tall glass. Maya watched the reflection of passing cars in the mirrored building across the street. Her fingers, resting on her lap, curled and uncurled rhythmically, an old habit from debate team days. back when adrenaline masked itself as focus. The door creaked open. Maya glanced up. It was Cartwright. He was alone, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, and a look on his face that suggested decisions were being made faster than usual. "Miss Parker," he said, walking over and sitting across from her without invitation. "You shook a few trees this morning." She offered a tentative smile. "Did any fruit fall?" Some dead birds too." He chuckled softly, then leaned forward. "I've been working government deals for 28 years. I've had translators mess up, lawyers backpedal, diplomats ghost us mid-summit, but I've never had a server correct a billionaire and save a deal in the same sentence." Maya shifted slightly. "It wasn't planned. That's the best kind of intervention." He studied her. "How many languages do you speak?" "3 fluently. Hindi, Spanish, and French. A bit of Mandarin." "And your degree?" "Null. Political science. Double minor in South Asian studies and linguistics." Cartwright whistled low. "So what the hell are you doing serving water to people like Turner?" The question hit hard, not because it was rude, but because it was the same question Maya had asked herself 100 times. "My mom had a stroke last year. Medicaid didn't cover rehab. My brother's in school. Someone had to pay the bills. Columbia rejected my second grad application, and life got in the way." Cartwright nodded. "I understand more than you think." A beat of silence passed. "Listen," he continued. "We're reconvening in 20 minutes. Shetty's ego's still bruised, but he's calmed down. Legal reviewed the draft. You were right. It was the outdated clause. If we'd signed as is, there'd be lawsuits within the year. I'm glad I spoke up," she said quietly. "Good. Because I want you back in that room." Maya blinked. "Excuse me?" "I want you seated in that room, beside me. Not as a server, not as a translator, as a cultural advisor. Temporarily, for this deal. But official." Her heart skipped. "Sir, I don't." Cartwright raised a hand. "I've already cleared it with the hotel GM. Your shift is suspended for the day. You'll be compensated by the State Department as a civilian contractor. This isn't charity, Maya. You're just better prepared than half my team." Maya tried to speak but found herself overwhelmed. No one had ever given her a seat. Not without her forcing the door open. I'd be honored." "Good. You've got 10 minutes. Fix your badge, take a breath, and walk back in like you were always meant to be there." He stood, gave her a firm nod, and left as swiftly as he came. Maya sat still for a moment longer, coffee forgotten. Then she stood. 10 minutes later, she entered the conference room not through the service door, but through the main entrance. This time, the heads that turned did not look surprised. They looked expectant. Cartwright waved her over. She took the seat beside him. Across the table, Shetty gave her a cold but restrained nod. His assistant glanced away, clearly unsure how to process the shift in dynamic. Turner, eyes narrowed, muttered, "Well, this should be interesting." Cartwright cleared his throat. "Shall we begin again?" They did. Clause by clause, term by term, the negotiation resumed. But now, every time cultural nuance came into play, Cartwright turned to Maya. She clarified, translated, interpreted intent, and gradually, the mood shifted from formality to flow. By the end of the session, Shetty was speaking directly to her. "You should be doing this full-time," he said in Hindi, "not hiding behind glasses and trays." Maya met his gaze without blinking. "Then maybe stop assuming we all belong in the background." He nodded once, tight-lipped. But this time, it held respect. When the final draft was printed and signatures exchanged, applause filled the room. Cartwright leaned toward her and whispered, "You just negotiated a $5 billion deal before lunch. Welcome to the big leagues." And just like that, Maya Parker wasn't a server anymore. She was something else entirely. And the world was beginning to notice. The conference room emptied slowly, like the aftermath of a long storm. Papers were gathered, briefcases snapped shut, and a faint buzz of congratulatory chatter rippled across the room. The ink on the agreement was still wet, yet its impact had already begun to settle. As Maya stood beside Cartwright, watching the flow of important men and women exit, she felt the surreal weight of it all pressing gently on her chest. It had happened. She'd spoken out, stood her ground, and now she wasn't just seen, she was part of the room. "Make sure to follow up with legal on the addendum," Cartwright said to his assistant, then turned back to Maya. "Come with me." There's something you should hear. They left the grand conference room and walked through the narrow service corridor toward the staff elevator. Cartwright tapped the call button, then glanced at her with something unreadable in his expression. People are going to start talking, he said. Not just about what happened today, but about you. They're going to ask where you came from, who sent you, what your angle is. I don't have an angle, Maya said quietly. You do now, he replied. The elevator dinged. They stepped in. As the doors closed, Cartwright sighed, not in frustration, but caution. I'm not trying to scare you, but rooms like that full of men with power and ego don't change because of one afternoon. You poked a hierarchy. Don't be surprised if it pokes back. They arrived on the administrative floor. Cartwright led her to a small glass office tucked between two larger suites. Inside, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes was waiting. Ellen Dubois, Cartwright introduced. Senior Advisor, Office of Cultural Diplomacy. Ellen, this is Maya Parker. Ellen extended a hand. Quite the entrance you made, young lady. Maya shook her hand firmly. Ellen gestured for them to sit. Cartwright says you've got the ears and instincts of a field interpreter and the backbone of a prosecutor. That true? I try not to stay silent when I know something's wrong, Maya replied. Good, because I want to offer you a provisional assignment. Temporary, unofficial, but significant. Maya straightened in her chair. Last year, Ellen continued, a similar deal in Singapore unraveled because our team missed two culturally coded terms. We embarrassed ourselves. What you did today stopping a mistake like that before it happened is exactly what we need more of. Cartwright added, we're assembling a task group. Think of it as a cultural firewall. Advisors who understand more than just language, who understand nuance, power dynamics, context. Ellen leaned in. You wouldn't be the first woman in the room, but you might be the first who got there by sheer force of voice. Maya was quiet. This wasn't just a compliment. It was an invitation to something real, something that pulled her far from serving trays and name tags. What would the assignment involve? She asked. For now, a temporary secondment. You'll sit in on briefings, flag potential missteps, work with translation staff. Quiet presence, but essential. And afterward? Ellen smiled. We'll see how well you dance with the wolves. Maya nodded slowly. I'm in. Good. Ellen stood, offering a small folder. Your badge. Temporary clearance. Cartwright will show you the ropes. Outside the office, the hallway was quieter than before, but Maya felt the vibration of change beneath her feet. She followed Cartwright back down toward the lobby, her mind spinning. As they passed the hotel's main elevator, they nearly collided with Turner. He wasn't smiling. Quite the story, isn't it? He said coolly. The maid who outsmarted the room. Maya met his gaze. You mean the woman who caught your mistake? He stepped closer. You got lucky. You embarrassed a billionaire in front of a federal team. Do you really think that ends well? Cartwright took a step between them. That's enough, Turner. Turner held up his hands, mockingly, just offering some career advice. Flashy moments make headlines, but they also make enemies. He walked off, leaving behind a bitter silence. Maya turned to Cartwright. Was he always like that? Turner's sharp, but he plays to win, not to grow. People like him see corrections as attacks. He made a mistake, she said. And he knows it. That's what scares him. Cartwright looked at her seriously. You need to understand something. What you did wasn't just smart. It was disruptive. And disruptions, even when necessary, don't go unpunished in places like this. Maya took a breath. So what do I do? You keep being excellent, Cartwright replied. And you stay 3 moves ahead. That night, as Maya returned home exhausted, heart still racing, she stood at her apartment window, watching the city hum beneath her. In the silence, she remembered her father's voice, gentle and steady. You can't ask the world to hear you if you whisper. Speak up, always. She wasn't whispering anymore, but she knew now being heard was only the beginning. 2 days later, Maya stood at the threshold of the Reagan Federal Building, her new badge clipped nervously to her blazer. It still felt surreal, this shift from carrying pitchers of water to carrying the weight of cultural interpretation in high-stakes rooms. But surreal or not, the metal detector buzzed her through, and she stepped into a world she had once only observed from the periphery. She had been briefed earlier that morning. She would join a closed-door session between U.S. tech representatives and an envoy from an international consortium. Nothing legally binding, but reputations were on the line. Ellen had insisted Maya's presence was essential, and Cartwright had seconded it without question. As she entered the small observation room attached to the main conference hall, Maya was greeted by an unfamiliar facia man in his mid-50s, gray-haired, tightly wound, and with a badge reading, Grayson Nichols, Policy Lead. "You're the one who made the splash at the Mayflower," he said flatly, not looking up from his notes. "Yes, sir," Maya replied, keeping her tone neutral. "I'm told you'll be sitting in. Just don't interrupt. These things are delicate." She nodded. "Understood." Grayson glanced up, then did a visible double-take. "You're young. I'm qualified." He grunted, but said nothing else. Maya took her seat and reviewed the updated draft of the partnership agenda. She spotted 2 phrasing inconsistencies in the translated briefing materials almost immediately. Small, but if misinterpreted, they could cast unintended offense. She marked them discreetly and flagged them in a quiet note to Cartwright's aide. Minutes later, the delegation entered. 4 sharply dressed executives from Southeast Asia, accompanied by a woman named Dr. Lin, took their seats. Dr. Lin wore a silk scarf over a pristine cream suit, her expression unreadable but attentive. Maya watched as the conversation unfolded, pleasant at first, full of compliments and vague promises. But as they began discussing software governance, Maya noticed something shift. One of the American presenters used the phrase, compliance enforcement, several times too forcefully, in her opinion. In Vietnamese culture, direct impositions, especially using language that implies control or oversight, often create quiet resistance. Maya leaned slightly forward, catching Cartwright's eye through the side window. He nodded, giving her the signal. She tapped her mic. "With respect, I suggest we consider replacing enforcement with mutual compliance framework. The original term may imply unilateral oversight." There was a pause. Dr. Lin looked toward the glass, clearly having heard. "Miss Parker?" Cartwright said, smoothly looping her in. "Would you mind joining us for this portion?" Maya entered the main room and offered a polite nod. She adjusted her scarf subtly, mirroring Dr. Lin's, then addressed the room in a steady voice. "In Vietnamese negotiations, language is a bridge, not a barricade. Our intention is shared governance. I believe a small linguistic shift can realign that tone." Dr. Lin smiled faintly. Spoken like someone who knows where diplomacy truly begins. Grayson shifted uncomfortably, but stayed quiet. The remainder of the meeting ran more smoothly. Maya stepped back into the observation room afterward, heart still thudding. She knew she'd walked a tightrope and didn't fall. After the session, as Cartwright gathered his things, Grayson lingered behind. "You speak Vietnamese?" "Some. Enough to understand formality and implication." He folded his arms. "You made me look like I didn't prep my team." "I didn't intend that." "Doesn't matter. Perception is power, Miss Parker." Maya met his eyes. "Then maybe we should focus more on the perception our guests leave with." He didn't respond. Outside in the hallway, Ellen was waiting. "He'll come around," she said as they walked. "I'm not trying to start turf wars," Maya replied. But you're occupying space that was previously unchallenged. That's always a threat to someone." They turned a corner, heading toward the elevator. "You've got a gift," Ellen continued. "But I need to know, can you handle the pressure when the rooms get tighter, the stakes higher, and the egos more fragile?" Maya paused. "I was raised by a woman who survived Jim Crow laws and still taught me to speak 6 languages before I was 15. I think I can handle fragile egos." Ellen chuckled. "Good, because next week, you're going to Brussels." Maya stopped in her tracks. "Brussels? There's a summit. Energy, cultural equity, digital diplomacy. Cartwright wants you on the ground team. Observing, intervening if necessary." Maya took a breath. 2 weeks ago, she was polishing glasses. Now she was headed to Europe as part of a federal diplomatic task group. "Pack light," Ellen added. "And remember, the higher the room, the quieter the weapons." Maya nodded. She wasn't just in the room anymore. She was becoming part of the strategy. The air inside the government-chartered jet was unusually quiet calm, but loaded with expectation. Maya sat by the window, her seat angled just enough to give her a view of the clouds drifting beneath them. Brussels was 6 hours away. 6 hours from yet another threshold she'd never imagined crossing. Across the aisle, Cartwright was reviewing a digital dossier. He wore a headset but kept glancing over at her, as if trying to gauge how she was processing the shift from hotel service to high-level diplomacy. He finally pulled off the headset and leaned over. "Nervous?" he asked. "Yes," Maya replied, not pretending otherwise. "I don't even know what's waiting for me there." "Good. That means you're paying attention." He handed her a slim folder. Inside were briefing notes, cultural summaries, and an invitation to a private policy roundtable held at the U.S. consulate in Brussels. At the top, her name was listed under Linguistic and Cultural Advisory, Observer status. "Observer," she murmured. Cartwright smirked. "You'll be more than that, but officially, let's keep it light for now." Maya nodded, flipping through the notes. She recognized a few names: ambassadors, tech CEOs, even a senator who'd once spoken at her college commencement. The stakes were clearly high. "Why me?" she asked, not out of doubt but necessity. "Why not someone already inside the system?" Cartwright looked at her for a long moment. "Because the system misses things," he said finally. "It filters out people like you not because of lack of skill, but because you don't fit the mold, and the mold is flawed." She took a breath, considering that. "I still feel like someone's going to figure out I don't belong." Cartwright leaned back. "Then prove that you do." The plane landed just past 9 a.m. local time. A sleek black vehicle was waiting on the tarmac, and they were driven directly to the U.S. consulate where a team of aides greeted them. Maya followed Cartwright through security, scanning the architecture stone corridors, minimalist artwork, the quiet bustle of power moving without noise. She was taken to a temporary office to review documents before the evening reception. Her nerves were steady, but her thoughts were racing. This was no longer about catching one translation error. This was diplomacy at scale. At 7:30 p.m., dressed in a simple black suit with a navy silk scarf, Maya entered the consulate ballroom. She scanned the crowd, well-groomed professionals, a mixture of languages floating like perfume through the air. She spotted Ellen Dubois in one corner, deep in conversation with a European commissioner. Cartwright waved her over to join a small circle of American and European delegates. Introduction passed quickly. "This is Maya Parker," Cartwright said. "She's assisting us with cultural and linguistic insight." An older man, sharp-eyed and French, arched a brow. "A new face. How refreshing. You don't come from the usual path, I take it?" "No, sir," Maya replied with a small smile. "I came through the kitchen." There was a brief pause, then soft laughter, the kind that signals curiosity rather than dismissal. As the evening wore on, Maya spoke little, but listened sharply. She caught undertones moments when the American side unintentionally pressed too hard, or when a phrase landed awkwardly in translation. Twice, she gently offered alternatives, each time met with gratitude or intrigued glances. It was during one such interaction that she noticed him. A man in his late 40s, well-dressed, standing near the bar with two others. He wasn't speaking, but he was watching her. Their eyes met briefly. He nodded, then turned away. "Who is that?" she whispered to Cartwright. He glanced. "Luca Arendt, former diplomat, now a private advisor for one of the EU economic boards, keeps to himself. Sharp mind, but plays long games." Maya felt the look linger long after he turned. Later that evening, after the event, she walked the quiet halls of the hotel they'd been assigned to. The corridor lights dimmed with motion sensors, casting long shadows as she passed. Her phone buzzed. An encrypted message from Ellen. "Tomorrow's briefing includes Arendt. Don't underestimate him. He tests people before he engages. Keep your answers clean, your insight sharper." Maya stared at the screen, the weight of each word sinking in. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was a test, and somewhere in this city of glass and whispers, the real game was about to begin. At precisely 8:45 a.m., Maya entered the briefing chamber on the third floor of the consulate, her notes pressed tightly under one arm. The room was smaller than she expected, intimate, understated, but no less intimidating. Around the rectangular table sat 7 individuals, all with quiet authority written into the lines of their posture. Ambassadors, legal aides, energy consultants, and at the far end, Luca Arendt. He didn't acknowledge her as she entered, but she could feel his attention, even from across the room. He sat perfectly still, hands folded before him, expression unreadable. His gaze wasn't intrusive, but analytical, like someone reading a text only he understood. Cartwright gave her a quick nod and motioned toward the seat beside him. Maya took it silently, laying her documents in front of her, already rehearsing responses in her mind. The meeting began with the Belgian delegate outlining the framework for cross-border renewable investment protocols. Much of it was familiar to Maya. She'd spent half the night absorbing it. But it wasn't the content she was focused on. It was the nuance. At one point, the Danish advisor used the term priority nations, referencing a list of countries for initial partnership. Maya immediately noted a flicker of discomfort from the Nigerian representative seated 2 chairs away. She leaned slightly toward Cartwright and whispered, "We should recommend changing priority nations to initial phase partnerships. The current phrasing implies hierarchy, not sequence." Cartwright nodded and spoke up. "Small recommendation language refinement. Initial phase partnerships might be less weighted." There was a murmur of agreement around the table. Even Arendt gave the smallest of nods, as if confirming her intuition. But it wasn't until 40 minutes later that the first real shift occurred. During a discussion on global data rights and cross-sovereign AI governance, a debate broke out over the legal jurisdiction of digital identities. One delegate argued that corporations should lead data policy. Another insisted on state oversight. Then, for the first time, Luca Arendt spoke. "Miss Parker," he said, his tone perfectly civil. "You've been quiet, yet your eyes suggest you have something to say." Maya looked up, surprised but ready. "Only an observation. When a company owns a user's data, the state loses its moral leverage. But when the state alone owns it, civil liberties risk being compressed. It's not a matter of who holds the key, it's who decides when it gets used." Arendt smiled faintly. "Poetic, but actionable?" "Actionable means compromise. Transparent oversight panels with both sovereign and civil representation. Legally binding thresholds for when data can be accessed, and by whom, and clear appeals mechanisms that reach beyond national borders." For a moment, silence. Then Arendt leaned back, fingers steepled. "That's a concept I proposed 3 years ago. It was dismissed as too abstract. Maybe it was ahead of its time," Maya said, holding his gaze. "You seem to enjoy walking lines others fear," he replied. "I grew up knowing that silence often costs more than speech," she answered. The room seemed to shift around them again, subtle but certain. The temperature of the conversation changed. From that moment forward, Maya was no longer an observer. She was a participant. After the session, as people gathered in smaller circles, Cartwright placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Well played," he said. Maya exhaled, only now realizing how hard her muscles had been working to stay poised. Was that a test? Every word he speaks is a test. They stepped aside to get coffee from a small bar cart set up in the corner. As Maya stirred in cream, Arendt approached. "Miss Parker," he said, tone polite. "Walk with me." She hesitated, but Cartwright gave her the smallest nod. Outside the briefing room, the hallway was quiet, the noise of the world distant. "I watched how you watched," Arendt said. "You don't just listen to language, you listen to weight." "I try to listen to what people think they're hiding," she replied. "Dangerous gift. Only when it threatens power." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You're not here by accident, Maya. But understand this room's like that?" He pointed back toward the chamber. "They don't mind new voices. What they mind is clarity. And you speak with too much of it." Maya squared her shoulders. "Then maybe they need to be uncomfortable." Arendt studied her for a beat, then gave a quiet laugh. "I'm not your enemy. I'm just one of the few who sees where this might lead." "And where's that?" "To a world where people like you stop being exceptional and start becoming expected." He turned and walked away. And for the first time since her voice echoed through that gilded ballroom back in D.C., Maya felt it. She wasn't just walking through a door anymore. She was pushing it open for others. The evening sky over Brussels hung like velvet, a dark canvas scattered with golden lights. From her hotel window, Maya could see the distant silhouette of the Grand Place. Tourists wandered the cobblestone streets, laughter floating through the cool air, but inside her room, the mood was far from light. She sat at the edge of her bed, her laptop open, screen aglow with draft notes from the summit. Her comments and revisions were now being directly embedded into the master documents, a clear sign her presence was no longer peripheral. She was being trusted, but trust in these circles was a coin with two faces. A soft chime on her phone startled her. Message from Ellen. Need to speak. Meet in the West Lounge. Now. Maya grabbed her blazer and descended the stairs quickly, passing a few other delegates in the lobby who nodded at her with an air of cautious recognition. Her name was starting to circulate, not always with praise, but definitely with attention. The West Lounge was dimly lit, a quiet retreat with tall windows and velvet armchairs arranged like chess pieces. Ellen sat in one, a glass of water before her. No papers, no device. "You're making waves," she said as Maya approached. "I thought that was the point," Maya replied, half smiling. Ellen's expression remained serious. "It is, but there's chatter. A few senior advisors, American and foreign, think you're moving too quickly. One even implied you were planted." Maya blinked. "Planted? As in, strategically placed to stir or surveil. It's nonsense, of course, but this is the danger of rising fast. People start rewriting your origin story to make it more convenient for them." Maya sank into the chair across from her. "So what do? You stay precise, clear, document everything, and you keep doing what got you here, being smarter than their assumptions." Ellen leaned forward. "But I need you to watch someone. Grayson Nichols." Maya's posture stiffened. "He's from our own side." "Yes, and he's also been feeding alternate summaries to the European Digital Oversight Panel. Skewed versions, downplaying certain cooperative clauses. Word is, he's trying to push a parallel proposal through a private tech consortium." Maya's brow furrowed. "Why would he do that?" "Because people like him bet on control, not equity. And your voice threatens that." Maya took a long breath. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing loud. Just observe. If he makes a move in tomorrow's data session, twists terminology, undermines collective authority, I want it noted, flagged, and quietly corrected." Maya nodded. She wasn't new to surveillance, just new to doing it in marble rooms. The next day began with a quiet tension humming beneath the diplomatic smiles. The data security session was held in a long vaulted chamber with acoustics so crisp even whispered conversations hung in the air. Grayson was already seated when Maya arrived, speaking casually with a Dutch executive. His demeanor was smooth, almost bored, but Maya knew better. As the moderator introduced a framework for unified digital identity protocols, Grayson raised a hand. "I'd suggest we soften the enforcement clause by referencing regional data autonomy models, rather than binding governance. There's cultural sensitivity at play." Maya recognized the phrasing intentionally vague, enough to allow powerful private entities to bypass transnational scrutiny. She scribbled a note, glanced toward Cartwright. He met her eyes and nodded ever so slightly. When the floor opened, Maya leaned forward. "If I may," she said, "while regional autonomy sounds inclusive, it lacks accountability. If we truly intend for cross-border protections, we must keep the original term, binding governance with transparent appeals. Without that, we're backpedaling into loopholes." Several heads turned. Grayson's eyes narrowed. "The goal here is diplomacy, Miss Parker," he said coolly. "And diplomacy isn't served by ambiguity," she replied, evenly, "especially when it affects people's data, identity, and rights." The room was still. Then the German delegate spoke. "She's correct. The original clause reflects what our public expects." The wording stayed. After the session, Grayson approached her near the courtyard steps. "You think you've figured this game out, don't you?" he asked. "I think I understand the rules enough to see when they're being bent. You've made enemies. I've made allies too." Grayson smiled without warmth. For now. She watched him walk away, tension simmering behind his tailored calm. Later that evening, as Maya debriefed with Cartwright and Ellen, she recounted the exchange in full. "You did well," Ellen said. "But we're shifting terrain now. Be ready. The summit ends soon, and some won't want you in the next phase." Maya leaned back, fatigue weighing her bones. "I didn't come here to last forever. I came to tell the truth. And that," Cartwright said quietly, "is exactly why we need you to stay." Outside, Brussels continued humming, but Maya knew beneath the lights, the real summit had just begun. Maya had thought the final day of the Brussels summit would offer some measure of calm, but as she entered the main hall that morning, she sensed immediately something had shifted. Conversations were more clipped, smiles tighter, and several glances once respectful or curious now carried a different weight. Suspicion, caution, perhaps even resentment. She moved with practiced ease, nodding to familiar faces, collecting her updated dossier, and making her way to the side of the room where Cartwright stood speaking with a Spanish cybersecurity attaché. He broke off when he saw her. "There's a memo circulating," he said without preamble. Unofficial, unsigned, but clearly authored by someone inside the American delegation. Maya's heart stilled. "What does it say? That you overstepped. That you're not a credentialed diplomat. That your presence here skews the neutrality of our team." She kept her face composed, but her stomach tightened. "It's Grayson. Almost certainly, but it's veiled well. He's no fool. What do we do? We stay the course. But you need to be sharp. If they're trying to freeze you out, they'll do it through process, not confrontation." As if on cue, a junior Belgian staffer approached her with a clipboard. "Miss Parker, your clearance for the final working group session has been amended." Maya blinked. "Amended how?" "You've been moved to observer status. Remote access only. You'll be watching from the adjoining room." Cartwright started to object, but Maya touched his arm. "It's fine," she said. "Let them play." She followed the staffer to the smaller observation suite, its glass wall providing a view into the main room. A speaker piped in the conversation, slightly delayed, but clear. She took a seat, watching as Grayson positioned himself near the head of the table. Ellen was absentied up in a closed-door intelligence briefing, which left Cartwright flanked by a new State Department assistant, who barely looked old enough to vote. The meeting began with the review of joint resolutions on data equity. As each item was reviewed, Maya could see the subtle pattern: Grayson twisting phrases, downplaying prior agreements, nudging the conversation toward ambiguity. Then came the moment she'd been waiting for. Grayson proposed a voluntary clause on ethical oversight, replacing a binding resolution that Maya herself had drafted 2 days earlier. It was a direct attack on her work framed as a compromise. She picked up her tablet and typed quickly, sending a secure message to Ellen. Clause 3.2 being altered removes binding oversight. Grayson driving it. Intentional obfuscation. Request intervention. Seconds ticked by. Nothing. Then, suddenly, a flicker of movement at the edge of the room. Luca Arendt. He hadn't been listed as attending today's session, yet there he was, stepping through the side entrance, whispering briefly to a protocol officer, and walking directly to the table. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he stood behind his seat, hands folded. "I apologize for the late entrance," he said calmly. "But I felt compelled to comment on Clause 3.2. A voluntary clause, as proposed, may appease political sensitivities, but it invites legal chaos." Grayson stiffened. The term voluntary was intended to encourage cross-cultural buy-in. "And yet," Arendt continued, "the original phrasing had already secured preliminary consensus from 7 nations. Changing it now not only undermines progress, but risks unraveling the framework entirely." He looked directly at Cartwright. "May I ask if the original author of that clause is present?" Cartwright glanced up toward the observation window. Maya stood. Arendt turned ever so slightly. "Miss Parker, would you care to clarify your intent?" The speaker in the room clicked on, allowing Maya to speak. Her voice was firm. The clause was designed to protect data sovereignty without sacrificing enforceable standards. Voluntary compliance invites selective interpretation. It's a polite way of giving up accountability. Silence. Then one of the Nordic delegates spoke. "I support reinstating the original language." Another chimed in. "Agreed. Voluntary oversight lacks teeth." Grayson tried to recover, but the momentum had turned. The clause remained as Maya had written it. After the meeting, Cartwright and Arendt met her in the observation room. "You're getting very good at playing their game," Cartwright said. "I'm not playing," Maya replied. "I'm just refusing to fold." Arendt smiled. "Then be warned, refusing to fold makes you a target." Maya looked between them. "Then I guess it's time I started building armor." That night, in the quiet of her hotel room, she received a new message. This one wasn't from Ellen or Cartwright. It was anonymous. "Watch your back. Not everyone who claps is on your side." Maya stared at the screen for a long time. Then she deleted the message and began drafting her next report. The sun rose late over Brussels the next morning, filtered through the gray gauze of low-hanging clouds. Maya sat alone in the breakfast lounge of the consulate, a half-empty cup of coffee cooling by her hand. The summit was officially over, but in diplomatic circles, the real conversations often began once the documents were signed and the photographers had packed up. She scrolled through her tablet updates from Cartwright, a briefing memo from Ellen, and a secure packet from the Department of State marked, Urgent, Privet. The message was short and direct. Your work has been escalated. Director Chen would like to debrief with you, Washington, 36 hours. Priority 2 clearance arranged. Travel details forthcoming. Maya set the tablet down slowly, heart thudding. She had expected more time. But clearly, someone higher up had been watching and wanted her on the board. As she stood to leave, she caught sight of Luca Arendt stepping into the lounge. He moved with quiet deliberation, coat draped over one arm, as if unbothered by the swirling political dust the summit had left behind. Maya, he said, joining her table uninvited. Congratulations are in order. For not being devoured. The final vote, the clause you defended, those were significant wins. They were collective wins. Arendt smiled. Modesty is charming, but unnecessary. You made people uncomfortable, and you didn't back down. That's not a trait common in these halls. She tilted her head. Then why are you here, really? You're too seasoned to spend your time watching. He leaned forward slightly. Because people like Grayson are not anomalies. They are the architecture, and unless someone dismantles the scaffolding quietly, methodically, people like you will always be guests in rooms you've earned. Maya studied him. Are you offering to help me? I'm offering insight. I can open doors, yes. But more importantly, I can teach you how to stay inside once they close. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Message from Cartwright. Change of plans. Debrief happening on site. Arendt's presence requested as external consultant. Meet in conference chamber 3A. Maya glanced up, expression sharpening. Arendt's eyes twinkled, just slightly. Well, he said, rising. Seems the game continues. They walked together through the corridor, past tired aides and staffers preparing departure packets. Inside Chamber 3A, Cartwright, Ellen, and 2 new faces were already seated. One was a tall woman in a charcoal suit, Director Chen. Miss Parker, Chen said, standing to shake her hand. Thank you for joining us. I've reviewed your full summary from the summit. Thorough, precise, and unusually intuitive. Thank you, ma'am. We have a situation. One that may require your continued involvement, quietly, but deeply. Ellen slid a folder across the table. Maya opened it to find transcripts partial and redacted of internal communications between private contractors and a US-based tech firm with known ties to Grayson Nichols. They're trying to seed a parallel agreement tone that would override the summit's resolutions using third-party corporate treaties, Chen explained. No official fingerprints, but if it succeeds, everything your team accomplished will be ceremonial. Maya felt her jaw tighten. So it's sabotage. Legal sabotage. But yes, Cartwright replied. And you want me to fly to New York, Ellen said. There's a closed strategy session happening between the firm's leadership and a small group of legal advisors. You'll be there under the guise of a cultural consultant. Listen, observe, report. Arendt added, Grayson's fingerprints won't be there. But someone is acting on his behalf. We need to know who. Chen folded her hands. You're not under threat, but you are visible, which means subtlety matters. This is no longer about diplomacy. It's about leverage. Maya nodded slowly, absorbing the room's gravity. And if I find evidence? You send it, we act. She rose from her seat. When do I leave? Tonight. As the meeting dispersed, Cartwright walked her to the hallway. This will be different, he said. More shadows, less applause. I didn't come for applause, Maya replied. I came to keep people honest. He smiled, tired but proud. Then keep doing exactly that. Back in her room, Maya packed quickly, movements fluid, efficient. She thought of the anonymous warning from the night before, of the invisible hands working behind Grayson, of the quiet war no one admitted was happening. As the car arrived to take her to the airstrip, She took one last look at the Brussels skyline, the old and new pressed together in steel and stone. She didn't know what waited for her in New York, but she did know this: she would not be quiet anymore. And no matter what shadows lay ahead, she would walk into them with her eyes wide open. New York was loud in a way Brussels wasn't. The noise wasn't just traffic, and Serenset was layered urgency, people moving with purpose but never peace. As Maya stepped out of the black car onto 52nd Street, the wind pushed back her coat like the city was trying to test her resolve. She didn't flinch. The headquarters of Zernex Solutions loomed ahead, a towering block of glass and chrome, its entrance lined with planters that tried to soften the building's hardened edges. She approached the security desk, handed over her credentials sewn from the Department of State, the other coded to a fake cultural consulting firm crafted by Ellen's team. Inside, she was greeted by a woman in her 40s named Valentina Cole, Zernex's head of international relations. Sharp suit, softer smile. "Miss Parker," she said, shaking Maya's hand, "we're honored to have you with us. Your name's traveled faster than most press releases." Let's hope it's for the right reasons," Maya replied calmly. Valentina led her through the lobby, into a private elevator that required dual access. "You'll be sitting in on a regional strategy session, mostly policy heads, a few legal observers, and a representative from the Asia-Pacific Trade Group." They stepped into a conference room overlooking Midtown. The walls were all glass, the table a single slab of polished stone. Maya was introduced in passing, her presence explained as a lens on narrative inclusivity for upcoming initiatives. She took her seat near the window, a tablet in front of her, stylus in hand, and began listening. The meeting started predictable updates on regulatory timelines, ongoing market concerns in Southeast Asia, and shifting language and policy drafts. But within 20 minutes, the conversation took a darker turn. A man named Conrad Hale, a legal consultant with a clean-cut exterior and an unnerving calm, began discussing how to adapt existing clauses from the Brussels summit into a proprietary draft for Zernex's private agreement with a network of multinationals. "This way," he said, "we maintain the spirit of the summit while avoiding entanglement in actual enforcement mechanisms." "Enforcement mechanisms," Maya repeated silently. The exact framework she had fought to preserve. Another executive chimed in. "What about the cross-border accountability clause?" Conrad smiled. "Language is flexible. We'll substitute it with domestic interpretation authority. It won't raise red flags immediately." Valentina glanced across the table but said nothing. Maya's stylus moved quickly, her notes encoded but meticulous. It became clear, this wasn't a meeting about cooperation. It was a workshop in how to neutralize it. After 2 hours, the session adjourned for a catered break. Maya stepped aside, checking her secure channel, uploading her notes with minimal metadata. As she hit send, she felt a presence at her back. "Careful," a voice said softly. "Some of us are still watching." She turned. It was Valentina. "I know who you really are," Valentina added. "Or at least, who you're not. You're not just here to talk about cultural alignment." Maya didn't blink. "And yet, here I am." Valentina looked at her for a long moment, then nodded toward a quieter corner of the floor. They walked in silence until they reached a glass partition that hid a small seating area. "I used to believe in this place," Valentina said, her voice low. "Then I started reading what didn't make it into the minutes." Maya waited. "You're not the only one trying to stop what's happening, but you need to move fast. Tomorrow, they're finalizing the alternate draft and sending it to a closed group of congressional aides. If it lands, it will override everything your team fought for in Brussels." "Who's backing it?" Maya asked. Valentina hesitated. "Not just Grayson. There's a funder, private, untraceable. They're laundering influence through philanthropy arms and shell firms." Maya nodded. She'd seen this pattern before, but never this close. "I can't expose them," Valentina said. "Not without burning every bridge I've built." "You don't have to," Maya replied. "Just tell me where the draft is stored." Valentina looked around, then wrote something on a slip of paper and passed it to her. "Sub-level 3, secure archive room, red server bay. Username only works until midnight." "You didn't get this from me," she said. "You have my word." That night, under the pretense of reviewing cultural reports in the Zernex data library, Maya took the staff elevator down to the sub-level. The hallway buzzed with fluorescent light and the silence of late hours. At the far end, she found the archive room. The door opened with a biometric scan tied to her temporary credentials, another back door Ellen had arranged. Inside, rows of servers blinked steadily. She approached the red bay, entered the username, and waited. The screen flickered to life. A folder appeared. Zernex, Diplomatic, Draft, Version 4. She opened it. There it was, line after line of policy rewrite. Her clause on binding governance? Replaced. The phrasing around ethical appeals? Gutted. The language was dressed up, but the structure had been hollowed out. She copied the entire folder, encrypted it on a secondary drive, and logged out. As she turned to leave, her phone vibrated. Anonymous message. They know. The hallway outside was still. Maya slipped the drive into her boot, closed her coat, and walked calmly back to the elevator. Her face betrayed nothing. The war she was in now wasn't just about words. It was about who controlled the silence between them. The evening outside Zernex had surrendered to silence, the city's skyline glowing faintly through the rain-spattered glass. Maya descended in the near-empty elevator, her pulse steady but urgent. In her coat pocket, the encrypted drive felt like a live spark against her leg. Back in her room, she closed the door softly, windows dark beneath the storm. She placed the drive on the desk beside her laptop, then powered it on and plugged in the USB port. The indicator light blinked steadily. She opened the encrypted drive to review the files before sending them to Ellen and Director Chen. Line by line, the rewritten draft scrolls across her screen. Subtle subversions. Terminology stripped of enforceability. Ethics clauses rebranded as advisory notes. She paused at one section. Article 4.2, Oversight Framework, now downgraded from binding to recommended best practices. The betrayal felt colder than the Brussels rain. Her phone buzzed a second anonymous message. You have 1 hour. Maya swallowed. No panicked breath, only action. She opened her secure comms and wrote, To Ellen, Cartwright, Director Chen. Subject, Urgent. Zernex TCP breach discovered. Encrypted draft retrieved. They're bypassing the summit with a private alternative. See attached extract. I need extraction plan. She attached a 2 megabytes excerpt, redacted where necessary. She hit send. Within seconds, the outgoing indicator lit. Seconds later, a reply from Ellen. Secure evac ready at 0100H burn all devices. Trust no one in Z office. Maya stood. She grabbed the USB drive, a small flashlight, and a jacket. She didn't need many things, only survival and truth. At exactly 0100, the knock on her door came. 2 silent figures in black coats, Cartwright and Arendt. No words exchanged. They handed her a secure laptop bag containing a fresh laptop with a burner SIM, charcoal suit, and a ticket for a midnight flight from Newark. Under harsh stairwell light, they gave instructions. Cartwright warned, they'll try to trace you after departure. Apps, credit, access, assume they'll shut it all down. Arendt's gaze lingered. You're a signal now. Worth protecting. But also worth mining. Remain unpredictable. Maya nodded. They left without goodbye. The rain had eased, but the air was still raw with tension. She exited the hotel through the service door, slipping into the night, phone off, coat pulled tight against her back. In the consulate's lobby, the hush of late hours felt surreal. The lights flickered as she passed international flags lined down the hall, silent witnesses. She reached the exit onto Rue de la Loi, retrieved her phone, deleted all recent calls and messages, and placed it offline in the jacket's hidden pocket. A black SUV waited. She entered quietly. The engine started, and they were off. They passed under bridges, through empty boulevards. Cartwright spoke for the first time. You did well, but now, it's about survival and testimony. You'll be asked to testify before a Senate Oversight Committee, possibly several. Maya swallowed. I'm ready. Arendt gave her a nod of respect. Your story will shift battlegrounds. It'll be personal now. Keep your narrative clear. The summit was overridden. This file proves it. At Newark, they slipped her through a side entrance. She boarded the midnight plane, the cabin dark except for dim ceiling lights. She changed into the charcoal suit in the cramped lavatory, leaving the service uniform behind. As the aircraft lifted off, Maya stared at the dark horizon through the oval window. Cloud shadows drifted across the moonlit sky. She held the drive close. This wasn't just about policy. It was about power, betrayal, and her place amid it all. And as she flew toward Washington, she understood something clear. She would return with the storm. Washington, D.C. emerged beneath the clouds like a chessboard of power. As the plane touched down at dawn, Maya watched the marble facades of federal buildings slide into view, the monuments rising like quiet sentinels. Her phone remained off, the drive still warm from the pressure of her grip. Everything she carried now was fragile safety, her truth, her role in a war that no one admitted publicly but everyone inside the circle could feel. A black government vehicle waited just beyond the tarmac. 2 agents escorted her silently, no names exchanged. She was taken to a temporary safe house tucked near Logan Circle, the kind of place that looked ordinary cream-colored walls, a wrought iron fence but had reinforced windows and 3 layers of encrypted access. Inside, Ellen was already waiting. She wore no makeup, her hair in a tight bun, her eyes sharper than ever. She didn't smile when Maya walked in. She simply said, "They know you took it." Maya nodded. "And I'm not sorry." You shouldn't be." But this just became something else. She handed Maya a printed memothic with redacted blocks. The cover read, "Preliminary Intelligence Findings, Zernix TCP Leak. Last night, while you were in the air, the Department of Commerce received a forged memo discrediting your participation in the Brussels summit. They're trying to bury your involvement, retroactively revoke your clearance. Luckily, Cartwright anticipated this." Maya said, "How do we fight a shadow campaign when the other side owns the light? We bring witnesses into the light, loudly, quickly." Ellen slid another document toward her. "You're going to testify before the Senate Select Committee on Technology and Oversight. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Maya leaned back. "That's not enough time. It has to be. If they bury the document before the hearing, the truth disappears." Maya closed her eyes for a moment. Her heart pounded not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what she was being asked to carry. "What do I tell them?" "Exactly what you saw, what you heard, what you stopped. Leave no room for spin." That afternoon, the prep began. A secure team coached her through potential lines of questioning, political landmines, legal traps, credibility challenges. Maya listened, absorbed, corrected them when they misrepresented the Brussels timeline. Her memory held each clause, each betrayal, each silence that had tried to consume her. When the lights dimmed in the conference room and the team dispersed, Ellen lingered. "You need to understand something," she said softly. "Tomorrow isn't just about the file. It's about everything you represent. They will try to dismantle you, not just your work, your voice, your background, even your right to speak. I'm not afraid of them. Number. But you'll need more than courage. You'll need composure. Because the minute you flinch, they'll use it to rewrite the story." Maya nodded. She had flinched before in private. When her mother was humiliated by a manager who thought her accent meant she was ignorant, when teachers underestimated her, when men spoke over her, when systems bent to protect themselves, but she had never flinched for long. That night, alone in her temporary room, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning gently above. She thought of her mother, her late grandmother, who had once been a domestic worker in Louisiana. She thought of the names she carried, those who never got to sit at tables like this, whose truths were never recorded in official minutes. And then she thought of Grayson Nichols. The man had spent his life building doors he could lock from the inside. But tomorrow, Maya would kick one wide open and stand in the doorway with the world watching. At precisely 9 a.m., the next morning, Maya stepped into the Hart Senate office building. Her charcoal suit was pressed, her badge clipped, her face calm. A dozen reporters waited outside, shouting questions she didn't answer. She didn't need to, not yet. Inside the chamber, the senators sat in a horseshoe, some curious, others wary, one or two clearly hostile. Behind them, aides scribbled notes and reporters tapped quietly on tablets. The hearing began. "Maya Parker, please state your name for the record." She did. "And your role in the Brussels summit?" "I was an independent policy consultant brought in to advise on ethical data frameworks and cultural impact clauses." "You are not a diplomat, Miss Parker." Why were you involved in negotiations at that level? Because the truth doesn't need a title to be spoken. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Senator Dwyer, one of the senior committee members, leaned forward. Let's talk about the file you retrieved from Zernex. Why did you access a secure corporate server? Because that server contained an alternative treaty meant to override the international consensus from Brussels.